So I've got my stand mixer here. You could do this without a stand mixer in a bowl and mix it all together and knead it, but I'm going to use the stand mixer. So I've got a cup of lukewarm water. We may have to add a little water once we get our flour in there. I'm using a whole white wheat flour from King Arthur. And we're going to also combine that with a little bit of King Arthur bread flour. So to that water, I'm going to add 1.5 teaspoons of yeast. And I'm going to sprinkle that in. And I'm going to stir that around just a little bit. And I'm just going to let it sit till it starts to bloom so that I know my yeast is good before I add my flour. So I'm just going to let it sit there for about 5 minutes to start to bloom. I'm using this Fleshman's Active Dry Yeast is the yeast I'm using. So you can see that yeast starting to come to the top. Every once in a while you'll see what looks like a little bubble just popping up to the surface. That's our yeast working. So I'm satisfied that that yeast is working. So now we're going to add our flour. And I have 1 3/4 cup of that white whole wheat flour. I'm going to add that. If you're weighing it, that's 206 grams. And then I've got 180 grams of bread flour, which is 1.5 cups of bread flour. Now, I'm going to put that dough hook on there. And we're just going to blend that up till it comes to a smooth ball. And to that, I'm going to add 1.5 teaspoons of salt, and I'm just going to sprinkle that in so that it becomes incorporated with that mixture. I'm going to turn it up, and I'm going to let that just blend till it comes together into a ball. So it's been blending a little bit, and I can tell I'm probably going to need a little bit more water, so I'm going to add a couple tablespoons of water and let it continue to blend. And once it starts coming together, you'll have to slow it down or it will throw the bread out of the blender. And we're just going to let that continue to knead until it becomes one complete ball. So as you can see, that's all incorporated. I'm going to stop it. And what you're looking for is a dough that's not sticky, that comes together but not sticky. And you can see when I press that, it's not sticking to my fingers. So what I'm going to do is mash that ball of dough all together. I'm going to drizzle a little bit of olive oil, and I'm just going to coat that so that it doesn't form an outer shell on there. Cover it with a dish towel, and we're going to let it set for about 60 to 90 minutes. Our pita bread has been proofing for about an hour and a half, so let's take a look at what we have. So what we're going to do now is divide it into about 8 pieces, and we're going to roll them into little balls, and we're going to let those rest for about 10 minutes. You can do this directly on your counter if you want to, but I've just got some parchment paper here that I'm going to put that dough on. So I'm just going to get a little bit of that flour on there, and we're going to take this one ball and divide it into 8. So I've got my dough scraper here. So I've got 4. And ideally you want them to be about the same size, but if they're not, no big deal. I'm just going to put them into little balls. but I'm just going to form them into little balls. Got all those balls formed. I'm just going to take a damp dish towel and lay it over it for 10 minutes. So we've had our pita resting for about 10 minutes. So now we're going to roll out each one of these balls and actually cook them. I'm going to do them on the stove top. You could do them in the oven, but I'm actually going to try them in a cast iron skillet. So I'm going to put a little flour on my rolling pin, and I want to roll these out about 7 inches. It doesn't have to be precise. We're just going to try to get them all the same size, but again, that's the beauty of rustic cooking. And while I'm rolling these out, I'm going to go ahead and start my skillet to heating up over medium-high heat. So that's about 7 inches there, and you don't want to stack them when you're rolling them out. I'm just going to set them off to the side, and I'm going to cover them with that damp dish towel until we're ready to cook them. But I'm just going to continue to roll all 8 of them out into round disc. So I've got a dry skillet here over medium heat. We're going to start to cook those pita breads. We're going to cook it for about, I don't know, 4 or 5 minutes on the first side and probably 1 to 2 minutes on the second side. So we're just going to let that start to toast up in that skillet. About 2 minutes in, you can see that pita bread starting to bubble up and starting to cook. So we're just going to let it go. So it's been cooking about 4 minutes. I think it's ready to flip. So I'm just going to flip that over and let it go maybe a minute on that side. I've got a second skillet going over here, and as you can see, that one's puffed up nicely. Look at that little pillow in that pita bread right there. A fresh one in. We're just going to continue to cook those until they're all done.